I think, very competitive in terms of a investor kind of perspective. The question about cost of the Treasury. So in terms of tax credits, and this is, I guess, the way I would frame it, it's a loss in tax, and that amounts to $6.5 million. All of the administration costs of the program were absorbed in Innovation Saskatchewan, so there were no new additional resources required from that. And I would also say that the $6.5 million is the amount of tax credits issued. The amount that's actually claimed, that could vary from year to year, and in fact, some part of the credit may not even be claimed. So I guess it's not really a true cost to the Treasury, but I guess the potential could be the $6.5 million. And I'm not sure if I missed any questions.
Thank you. I did have one, there was one question missed just in regards to achieving that laudable goal of tripling the tech sector, if there were any internal metrics or stretch targets that you had specifically for this incentive in order to reach that goal.
So Carrie, that was, the question was, if you didn't hear, the mechanisms we have in place to meet the growth plan goal on the tripling of the tech sector.
Okay, thank you. So in May of 2020, this past year, a study was released around the tech sector. So it was basically a labor market and economic impact study that was commissioned by Western Economic Development and ourselves. And the intent of the study was really to understand and get a baseline of the true picture of the tech sector. So the study basically looks at what would be sort of the true tech sector as what we would consider tech companies, and would includes all the workers that are involved or that work at those tech companies. But it also takes into account and looks at the tech sector tech employees that work in non-tech companies. So the intent again really was to get a true baseline of the impact of technology, in the provincial economy. And the idea is that this will be a baseline. The methodology that's used is going to be repeatable. It's also a methodology that, and part of the, I would say the interest from Western Economic Diversification on this project was that they want to be able to use this across other jurisdictions as well. And so, this particular study, included information around, the number of employees working in the tech sector, which is 52,300, and that includes 31,700 workers at tech companies and additional 20,700 tech workers in non-tech industries. It looks at the number of tech companies that we have in the province, which is 5,000 tech companies. I do note that a number of those companies are individual or contract kind of situations. And so what I would say is that we are continuing to look at which are the, we work with our partners such as SaskTech to determine what are the appropriate measures and baseline that we should be, looking at what we would be measuring with respect to that tripling in the growth sector. So, it is a work in progress, but we have a baseline that's been established by this labor market and economic impact study.
Thank you so much. My very last question, just for clarification on some of those numbers, both in regards to, I think, the 5,000 tech companies cited and more specifically, those numbers around, I think, the 62 companies and the 144 jobs created. Are those net? And going forward, is that how they'll be reported, or?
Is the 62 companies and 144 jobs net, and is that how they will be recorded going forward?
Yeah, those are the accumulated numbers from the start of the program in 2018, sorry.
Thank you, Minister, to your officials, and thank you, Madam Chair. I have no further questions.
All right. Are there any other questions from other committee members? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote on the clauses. Clause 1, short title. Is that agreed? Carried. Clause 2, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 3, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 4, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 5, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 6, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 7, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 8, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 9, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 10, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 11, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 12, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 13, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 14, coming into force, is that agreed? Carried. Her Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan, enacts as follows: the Saskatchewan Technology Startup Incentive Amendment Act 2021. I would ask a member to move that we report Bill number 30, the Saskatchewan Technology Startup Incentive Amendment Act 2021, without amendment. Mr. Steele so moves. Is that agreed? Carried. Minister, do you have any closing remarks on this bill in particular?
I don't, Madam Chair.
No? All right. We will now begin then our consideration of Bill number 31, the Innovation Saskatchewan Amendment Act 2021, Clause 1, short title. Minister, any opening comments on this bill you wish to make?
Sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. I am pleased to be here to discuss the Innovation Saskatchewan Amendment Act 2021. The proposed changes will provide Innovation Saskatchewan with the authority in its act to undertake several initiatives. Currently, the mandate of Innovation Saskatchewan is to provide advice and recommendations to coordinate, support, promote, and foster development of science and research and commercialization of technology. This mandate is not changing, nor are Innovation Saskatchewan's current programs. However, with these amendments, we are providing clarity to those powers and strengthening the language to support future initiatives. The proposed changes will provide Innovation Saskatchewan with the authority to invest $15 million over 5 years in a venture capital fund targeted at agriculture startups. The first ag-tech startups. The first installment of $3 million will be part of Innovation Saskatchewan's appropriation in the 2021-22 fiscal year. The amendments to the Act are required to provide the explicit authority needed to invest in this fund. This investment will help to leverage millions more from private investors for venture capital to develop beyond the startup phase and will enable ag-tech companies to scale up their operations and manufacturing in Saskatchewan. The second change addresses the composition of Innovation Saskatchewan's Board of Directors. Currently, the Act prescribes membership of the Minister and 6 other persons. The proposed change is to eliminate the fixed number and would instead state not more than 6 other persons. Innovation Saskatchewan remains a special operations agency within the same governance structure and legislation, but the change will allow for future flexibility of board composition. Similar amendments have been made to other agencies, most recently the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency. These changes are predominantly housekeeping in nature to strengthen Innovation Saskatchewan's ability to provide funding or financial assistance for the purposes of delivering programs to the public. As previously mentioned, Innovation Saskatchewan's mandate is quite broad, as are the powers of the organization that extend to that mandate. Other ministries and agencies have this explicit authority in their respective acts, and we are making those changes to provide that consistency, clarity, coverage, and authority for future programming. Thank you, Madam Chair, and with that, I would welcome questions from the committee.
Thank you, Minister. Questions from committee members? I will recognize Ms. Bowes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try and group these as it makes sense. The first question I have is around the amendment 5.3D, which states receive, accept, hold, invest, and disperse monies from any public or private source for carrying out its purposes. And the question there is, what is the intent of receiving money from private sources? How will that money be managed, including the costs of management? And to whom is the expenditure of that money accountable?
5.3. Just to clarify, which section was being referenced?
Is section 5, subsection 3, D.
The existing statute 5.3, we have 5.3A and B in the existing statute.
I think I missed something here. Right? So section 5, subsection 3, and then there's a 1, and then D, the D portion of that.
I see the reference that the member's making. It's modifying the wording in one of the existing provisions in the statute. Maybe what we'll do is if there's more questions, I would ask the member to just put them on the record, because we are going to have to collect and refer to officials the questions, particularly detailed provisions. So
if that makes sense. Next question is around the amendment clause 6B is repealed and the following substituted, not more than 6 other persons, referring to the number of people on the board. The question is, why would the minister allow for the board size to fall below 6 persons? Is there an intention to reduce the size of the board? And the next is the amendment which adds G, provides consulting, management, or advisory services to any other person, public or private, within or outside Saskatchewan. With this, I'm just not quite clear as to why this does not fit within the existing clause, unless the intent is to charge for those services. Is adding the clause subject to any directions of Treasury Board, and then it continues on for quite a bit there. So with that clause addition, I'm just wondering why the change is necessary, given that Innovation Saskatchewan has already invested in venture capital funding. I'm also wondering, how would any funds expended under the venture capital be reported back to the legislature? And what is the investment strategy to support this change? Like, what is the larger plan, or is there one for growing venture capital funds in Saskatchewan? And I'm wondering how much government involvement, for example, through Innovation Saskatchewan, will there be in the management of the funds? And how do we ensure that the funds will be held away from government interference? And Next question, what liabilities will this place upon the people of Saskatchewan and Innovation Saskatchewan? Should there be any losses, who is responsible, especially in the guarantees? My last question is, the clause allows for Innovation Saskatchewan to take on equity and debentures. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, sorry. Is there the investment strategy that will guide what can be a very risky activity, and how will Saskatchewan people be shielded from poor investments that we've seen in the past?
I think we have the questions written down. We're going to confer with the team at IS, and we'll return with a comprehensive response to all of the questions, and can go from there. So. All right, thanks, Madam Chair. So we have relayed the questions to officials as best we could. So they're going to do their best to respond. If there's anything missed, it's likely the fact that I didn't have a good enough notes, but I think we've got responses to the questions. So Carrie, you are now off mute and on the microphone.
Okay, thank you, and thanks again for the question. Or the questions, I guess. With respect to the amendment reference, the 5.31D.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So we have. I hear myself.
Sorry. So the intent of that clause is to actually allow Innovation Saskatchewan to administer the Saskatchewan Technology Fund that is being that we are jointly working on setting up with the Ministry of the Environment. And so, of course, this technology fund is one of 3 compliance options, as noted through the Prairie Resilience Plan, that will be available to regulated emitters operating in the province. And so, so monies paid to the tech fund will be used to fund technology innovations that will lower GHG and oil field methane emissions in the province. And so we were selected to administer this fund, because of our experience and expertise in delivering application-based funding programs, for example, the SAFE and Ag Tech or Ag Growth Fund that focus on commercialization of technology and in managing funding for several different innovation institutions across the province. And so in order for us to be able to receive funds from private companies that choose to put their funds into this particular tech fund, that is the reason for that amendment. In terms of the amendment of the board, so basically, the long and the short of it is really that we want to be in a position that we can operate in the event that we aren't able to secure 6 persons to advise the minister. I would also say that there is a number of different groups that do provide advice to Innovation Saskatchewan through other mechanisms besides our innovation board, whether that's through our participation on the boards of our funded institutes, or whether it's through working with groups like SaskTech. We do definitely have a number of places where we do seek advice and guidance. And also, again, just to reiterate that this really puts us into alignment with, with some of the other agencies, the most recent being the Saskatchewan, what's the name of it? The Public Safety Agency. The question about consulting or management or advisory service. So that clause is we don't intend to charge for consulting services, so to speak, but it does allow us to be in a place where if we're entering into a cost share agreement, even with another entity, that would allow us to provide that function. The clause around the venture capital. So in terms of the investment strategy there, so I guess maybe I'll just give a bit of a kind of an overview of how this is structured. So we are in negotiations with the potential fund manager, and a lot of the things that relate to the questions that you asked here relate to governance of the fund, governance of the investment strategy, also in terms of required reporting that we would have, and so all of those things we are negotiating right now. We as one of the largest investors in the fund. We will be a part of the Limited Partnership Advisory Committee, which is, again, sort of an overview group for the entire fund as it is. There is also an investment advisory committee that will be set up, that will be made up of a number of industry representatives, as well as financial experts. And that fund will make recommendation to the fund manager on potential companies to invest in. Innovation Saskatchewan will not be making the decision on any project or any particular company that is invested in. Again, I think that the question around liabilities, there is no liability for the government of Saskatchewan outside of we may lose some of our investment due to the lack of performance of companies that are invested in, but that would be the case. That wouldn't put us into a legal situation with any particular company. And then the investment strategy, just again go back to my earlier comment that there is a investment advisory committee. This is about digital ag, and that those will be the types of investments. That's the thesis of this particular fund, and those will be the type of investments that this fund will be making into those types of companies. So again, I just, there will be a very strong governance component to this in terms of our expectations of transparency, of reporting, of financial information back to the legislature.
As those questions have all been answered, are there any other questions from any other committee members? Seeing none, we will now move to vote off the clauses. Clause 1, short title, is that agreed? Agreed. Carried. Clause 2, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 3, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 4, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 5, is that agreed? Clause 6, is that agreed? Clause 6, carried. Clause 6 coming into force, that's agreed.
Carried.
Carried. Her Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan, enacts as follows: the Innovation Saskatchewan Amendment Act 2021.
It's lying right across here. The Her Majesty on yours, yeah. Perfect, thank you.
I would now ask a member to move that we report Bill number 31, the Innovation Saskatchewan Amendment Act 2021, without amendment. Mr. Jensen so moves. Is that agreed? Carried. Minister, any closing comments you would like to make?
No, just to say thanks to the committee staff.
Ms. Bowes?
Same comments. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Okay, that concludes our business this evening, and I would ask a member to move a motion of adjournment. Mr. Cockrell so moves. Is that agreed? Carried. This committee now stands adjourned until Monday, May the 3rd, 2021 at 3:00 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.